Hi everyone, I'm Dexter, and first want to talk a bit about me. I'm a nerd. I like to do all kinds of technology things. I'm a developer at Passionate People. Thanks for having me here. It's a great company. I really like working there. I'm also a maker. This is an infinity light I was making. It's very simple, but it's cool to make something new, learn a few new things, and yeah, this is my my area. You see my synthesizer on the left. Most of the modules you see there I built myself, and it makes some music, or what I like to call music. I would like to control the things I make and to be able to understand all the parts, to have the knowledge how to fix it, change it, make different things. I like to play around with technology and other stuff. Here you see me and a friend playing with this LED grid I made, creating the code that actually makes the pixels work. I like fresh software. I haven't played with Dino yet, but I find it interesting, and I really should actually play around with it. That's also how I got into Svelte. Some friend told me, you should look at this software, and I did, and I immediately jumped on it. Because I started with Svelte quite early, it also meant like the software breaks once in a while, or you've got a new version coming out, and everything needs to be rewritten, or most bits need to be rewritten. And you also tend to make some mistakes, or you don't know how it works yet, but you're still learning about it. In developing, I quite often like to be in the flow. People talk about the flow. And for me, it makes perfect sense to stay in a flow state when you're not really getting into the details, but you can paint the big strokes and not have to fix some annoying little bug you're smashing your head around for I don't know, a few days, maybe sometimes. It allows me to keep creating new things and to keep playing around with the things instead of getting bogged down into the details. So yeah, I have a lot of side projects, and quite often I notice people being interested in how I do it, what I use, and how I set up my stuff. Like besides the hardware projects, I also have quite a few software projects running, some simple things like a shopping list, synchronizing software, or something to manage people's information for a society I'm a part of. So that's why I'm giving this talk about my sweet stack, my software stack that I use to make my web projects. It's honed over many years of failing and tinkering and learning new software. So my basis is just a simple server, a VPS running on Trends IP, our Dutch cloud provider. And it's just running Debian. I do some things with the cloud, but most things I just like to run on my server with the versions I control. I get to choose who accesses my systems. On top of that, obviously, I use Docker. Docker is great in order to separate all the components apart. And together with Docker Compose, you can control very precisely what versions runs and what access it has to what files and whatever. It's really great. I have played around with many databases, but there's actually one database to rule all databases, in my opinion, and that's Postgres. It's very powerful, it's scalable, it's functional. You quite often don't really need to do big scalable things. You don't run the software so in such a scale quite often, so you don't need many complicated multi-tenant, multi-machine databases. And the added benefit is you only need to learn one tool very deeply instead of having many tools to learn all the ins and outs of and not really understanding and controlling them properly. Most of my projects, I have some API to manage the data in Postgres. There's now actually 2 really cool projects. Hasura, which is a Haskell-based GraphQL implementation who reads Postgres and allows you to manage your access control and the data. I'll show you a bit about that. And the other one is Supabase, which is open source. Really great software. You can run it on the cloud, but you can also self-host it. I haven't really run it on my VPS yet, but I want to get around to that. But that's also a very promising, cool piece of tech. Obviously, my framework of choice is Svelte. Most projects now are SvelteKit, and I really like it. I like how easy it is to get started and to make some components and to get going with it. And for continuous development, to not have to deploy the software constantly by hand, I use GitLab or GitHub CI. I have on the server I have runners installed for both GitLab and GitHub, so I can just quite easily deploy my projects on my VPS. So now I want to take you to my project I've built for this society. And it's storing some personal information, but it's also for people to access the data we store and, yeah, for some other things like a media wiki we're running, people can access it. So this is the project. It's on GitHub. It hasn't been seen much love. Like 2 months ago, I did a bit of refactoring. Most of the things you can see are in Docker Compose. I use a piece of software called Nginx Proxy, which actually allows you to proxy all the host names basically to the specific containers you want, and you can configure it like this. So this is a virtual host for this domain, and the proxy container actually proxies it and generates a certificate. So there's a simple app. It's a Svelte backend or a SvelteKit project. There's the database, Postgres, and here I map the volumes. The GraphQL is a Hasura, where I configure it like this, and basically it's just three containers running, and that's running the whole thing. So if I show you the live running things, I won't show you the data because there's personal info in there. But I would want to show you the events bit, which is quite nice. I've set up a mail database, and in this mail database, there's just emails being rendered or being generated. For instance, if people's password changed, they want to be notified. If they want to reset their password, they need to receive an email. Hasura has these event triggers, which are based on Postgres listen triggers, I believe. And basically, whenever an entry is inserted into the table, this mail trigger webhook is being called. And if I show you the code, this is the actual code that's being run. So here I set up a node or a SMTP transport. I'm not hosting my own email. That's another part. It's very tricky to do properly. And this is basically a webhook being called. It gets some data because you cannot really trust whoever calls this webhook to do it properly. So you need to verify from the data itself. There's some server token being generated here. And it gets the template from a set of templates. And these templates are plain old Svelte components. This is basically an email template for letting people know that their password has been changed. It renders it with the current render context, and it sends it out. It's quite simple, but in this way you generate emails for people. Another interesting bit is, I'm showing you on the server itself. We have quite a bit of software running. But I don't want to set up an OAuth provider and do all these complicated things. It's quite a lot of software to keep online for all the people. There's actually quite a few images running here. This Nginx proxy allows, or Nginx in general, allows for all web calls to have some subcall, basically. I did have it. So whenever someone goes to, for instance, the wiki, we can do a subcall to see if their token is still valid. And if it isn't, redirect them to the login page to get a fresh token. So if we go to the proxy, I can show the verify member. Basically, this Nginx configuration is being inserted, and this is saying on auth request, that's what it was called, it will call this auth location, and it will pass it to the members app, which is the Svelte app, and that basically is the same call as this one. So it will call the verify webhook, which will just basically verifies the token. It gives an OK. It gives some context back, so Nginx can pass that information back to the other service, and otherwise it generates an error. And that allows us to basically have people log in to whatever things. And so even though software like MediaWiki is not really made to integrate with other, it's made to integrate with other things, but you don't have to have the software always present to connect to an OAuth or an LDAP system and set it up. So this way, I'm being redirected to the members portal and can log in. And then we're logged in. And even Wiki now knows me as Dexter, and logging out also works. For deploying it, I guess most of you are familiar with the GitHub Actions. Really cool and free. So I let GitHub build my software, but the deploy step actually happens on the host itself, on the VPS itself. So basically GitHub SSH to my machine, checks out master. It copies the environment, because the environment is not in GitHub, but it's in a local file. It pulls the dependencies, and it just deploys the services by running Docker Compose up. It's pretty simple. So yeah, that's sort of how I have my software set up. I'm not really a big fan of serverless. You're not really in control of where your software is running, if your file system calls are really file system calls, and what API limit you have, what access control there is. You can learn about it, but quite often it's not really necessary, because you're not Google. There's this really interesting article about it, but basically, the most of the projects we build are not necessary to be in Google scale. It's just simple things for maybe 100 people or maybe 1,000 people, or it's a simple website with less traffic. And if you're being successful, it's always easier to scale than to scale prematurely and to learn about all the nitty-gritty details to how Lambda works, what the rate limits Lambda have. When you hit the rate limits, to have to build your software reliable so it can handle with the rate limits, stuff like this. If you control all the parts or make all the parts very simple, it will be much easier and you can be much more creative. Also, limitations, not having all the skill or the things that feed creativity. So whenever you can limit yourself in a certain way, learning only one thing, you can really dive into it and understand the things better. But never stop playing. If you see something cool like the CSS APIs that's coming out, really do something and break it. It doesn't need to be perfect. Yeah, that was my talk. Thank you.